On March 17, 1984, Carl Hensley signed on for his final overnight shift at WKRD-AM in Fulton, West Virginia. He'd worked the 3 to 6 slot for 11 years, playing country standards for truck drivers and insomniacs across the Appalachian foothills. At 3:47 a.m., mid-song, the station went dead. No sign-off, no technical difficulties announcement, just silence where Hank Williams had been. The FCC ruled it equipment failure. Case closed in 6 weeks. But they never explained why 14 listeners called the station that night reporting voices under the music. Voices reading names. Or why Carl Hensley's truck was found at the transmitter site 3 days later. Engine still running, driver's door open to the rain. The station never broadcast again. Carl Hensley was never found. 39 years later, Helen Marsh sat in a cramped apartment in Morgantown, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the smell of old paper. She'd spent 8 years building a true crime podcast from her bedroom, interviewing witnesses to cases the police had forgotten. Now she was something else, a documentary researcher, her producer called it, someone who dug deeper than microphones allowed. The box in front of her had arrived that morning. No return address. Inside, wrapped in newspaper from 1984, she found a cassette tape labeled in faded marker. WKRD, March 17, 3 a.m., listener recording. Helen turned it over in her hands. She'd never heard of WKRD. She'd never been to Fulton, West Virginia. But someone thought she should hear what happened that night. The tape hissed for 40 seconds before the music started. Patsy Cline, Crazy, the needle skipping slightly. Helen leaned closer to her speakers. Under the song, barely audible, a voice. Male, monotone, reading what sounded like a list.
Gladys Pruitt, born 1922, Mingo County. Samuel Hensley, born 1918, Fulton. Margaret Ann Cobb, born 1931.
The names continued for 3 minutes, 37 seconds. Then static. Then nothing. Helen played it again, and again. On the 4th listen, she caught something else. A second voice, distant, panicked.
Carl, what are you doing? Carl, stop! Carl, you can't read those on the air! Carl!
The recording ended. Helen sat in the silence of her apartment, goosebumps rising on her arms. She opened her laptop and typed, Samuel Hensley Fulton, West Virginia, 1918. The genealogy database returned a hit within seconds. Samuel Hensley, born April 3, 1918, in Fulton, West Virginia. Died November 12, 1983, 4 months before the broadcast. Helen scrolled down. Cause of death? Mining accident. Blackstone No. 4 mine. She searched the next name. Gladys Pruitt, born 1922, died August 1983. Stroke. Margaret Ann Cobb, born 1931, died January 1984. House fire. Helen's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. She'd found 3 names from the tape, all dead before the broadcast, all within 8 months of each other. She pulled up the Fulton County death records for 1983 and 84, cross-referencing against the names she could make out on the recording. By midnight, she had 17 matches. All dead. All read on the air the night WKRD went silent. Helen drove to Fulton on a Thursday morning, her car loaded with recording equipment she told herself she wouldn't use. The town sat in a hollow between 2 ridges, population 800 and falling. The WKRD building still stood on Route 19, but the windows were boarded and the transmission tower had been dismantled for scrap in 1992. She parked in the gravel lot and walked the perimeter. The on-air sign was still visible through a gap in the plywood. Red letters faded to pink. A man watched her from the porch of the house across the road. Late 60s, work boots, cigarette burning between his fingers.
You're the second person this year come looking at that building.
Helen crossed the road toward him.
Who was the first?
Didn't give a name. Asked about Carl Hensley. Asked about the names.
He took a long drag on his cigarette.
I told him what I'll tell you. I don't know nothing about that night, and if I did, I wouldn't say.
Helen checked into the Valley Motor Lodge on the edge of town. The room smelled like mildew and old smoke, but it had a phone jack and a table wide enough for her laptop. She spent the afternoon building a database, names from the tape, death dates, causes, connections. By 6 p.m., she'd identified 23 of the names Carl Hensley had read that night. 23 people who died in Fulton County between May 1983 and March 1984. The causes varied: mining accidents, car crashes, heart attacks, house fires, a hunting accident, 2 drownings. Nothing that stood out individually, but together, in a county of 4,000 people, 23 deaths in 10 months was nearly triple the normal rate. Helen stared at her spreadsheet. Either Fulton had suffered the worst luck in Appalachian history, or someone had been very busy that year. The Fulton Public Library occupied half of a building that had once been a hardware store. Helen found the newspaper archives in the basement, bound volumes stacked on metal shelving that hadn't been dusted since the Clinton administration. She started with May 1983. The Fulton Register, a weekly paper, ran 2 pages of obituaries each issue. She photographed every one. By the 3rd hour, her back ached and her eyes burned, but she'd found something. A pattern. Not in the deaths themselves, but in the survivors. Every obituary listed family members, and in case after case, the same name appeared. Not as the deceased, as the insurance beneficiary. Blackstone Mining Company Employee Benefit Trust. Helen had never heard of it, but it seemed to have inherited a great deal from the people of Fulton County. Helen found the librarian upstairs, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck.
I'm looking for information about the Blackstone Mining Company, specifically their Employee Benefit Trust.
The woman's expression didn't change, but her hand stopped moving over the card catalog.
Blackstone closed in '89. Records went to the State Archive in Charleston.
I'm more interested in the trust. Who administered it? Where the money went?
I wouldn't know anything about that.
The trust was named as beneficiary in at least 15 death notices I found downstairs. 15 people in less than a year.
The librarian removed her glasses and cleaned them with the hem of her cardigan.
People die in mining towns, miss. It's not a mystery. It's just life.
She replaced her glasses and returned to her work. Helen stood there a moment longer, watching the woman's hands tremble slightly as she filed cards into their slots. That evening, Helen sat in the parking lot of the VFW post, watching men in work clothes file in and out. She was waiting for Walter Pruitt. He arrived at 7, same truck, same cigarette. She caught him before he reached the door.
Gladys Pruitt, born 1922, Mingo County. She was on the tape. She's on my list.
Walter stopped walking.
Your mother?
My aunt.
She died in August '83. Stroke, the paper said.
That's what it said.
But that's not what happened.
Walter took a long drag on his cigarette, then crushed it under his boot.
Lady, you don't know what happened. You weren't here.
Then tell me.
I can't.
Can't or won't?
He looked at her for a long moment.
Same thing in this town.
Helen returned to her motel room to find the door slightly ajar. She stood in the parking lot for a full minute before approaching. Inside, nothing was missing, but everything had been moved. Her laptop was open to a blank screen. Her papers were restacked, slightly off from where she'd left them. Her recording equipment sat in the center of the bed, arranged in a neat row. On top of her cassette recorder, a note written in pencil on a scrap of brown paper bag. Some names should stay buried. Helen photographed everything before touching it. Then she packed her bags and drove to another motel 30 miles away. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in her new room, listening to the tape again, writing down every name she could hear. Somewhere in that list was the reason someone wanted her to stop. And somewhere in that list was the reason someone had sent her the tape in the first place. The FCC records office in Washington took 3 days to respond to her request. When the documents arrived, Helen spread them across the floor of her motel room like a jigsaw puzzle. WKRD's license had been held by Tri-County Broadcasting Corporation since 1968. The corporation's registered agent was a lawyer in Charleston named Howard Cobb. Helen ran the name through her database. Margaret Ann Cobb, one of the names on the tape, had been his mother. She died in a house fire in January '84, 2 months before the broadcast. Howard Cobb himself had died in 1991, heart attack. But the corporation had survived, transferred to a new registered agent whose name made Helen's stomach drop. The current license holder, listed since 1992, was the Blackstone Mining Company Employee Benefit Trust. Helen drove to Charleston the next morning. The state corporate records office occupied a floor of an anonymous government building downtown. The clerk behind the counter had the tired look of someone who'd answered the same questions for 30 years.
Blackstone Mining Company Employee Benefit Trust. Let me see what we've got.
She typed slowly, one finger at a time.
Established 1971. Trustees listed as... That's odd.
What?
The trustee list is sealed. Court order from 85.
Can you tell me why?
Doesn't say. Just says sealed pending resolution of case number...
She squinted at the screen.
Case number 85-2247. You'd have to request that from the circuit court.
Helen wrote down the number.
One more thing. The trust was named beneficiary in a lot of death notices in Fulton County in '83 and '84. How does a trust become someone's beneficiary?
Same way anyone does. The deceased names them in their will.
She paused.
Or someone names them.
The circuit court archives were in the basement of the county courthouse, guarded by a deputy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Helen filled out the request form and waited. 40 minutes later, a clerk emerged with a thin manila folder.
Case 852247, State versus Hensley, sealed by order of Judge Warren Marsh.
Helen's pen stopped moving.
Warren Marsh?
Retired now, 93, I think.
Helen stared at the folder in the clerk's hands.
That's my father's name.
Ma'am?
Warren Marsh. He was a circuit court judge. He retired in '93.
The clerk looked at the folder, then back at Helen.
Well, that would explain why you can't see this file.
He put the folder back in the box and returned it to the vault. Helen stood alone in the fluorescent light, her father's name echoing in her head. Warren Marsh. The judge who sealed the only case connected to 23 deaths and a radio station that went silent at 3 a.m. Helen hadn't spoken to her father in 4 years. They'd argued about her podcast, about her decision to leave her teaching job, about everything that had accumulated between them since her mother died. He lived in a nursing home in Huntington now, his mind sharp but his body failing. She called from a payphone outside the courthouse.
Helen, I wondered when you'd call.
You knew I was looking into WKRD?
I knew someone would eventually. I hoped it wouldn't be you.
You sealed the case file. State versus Hensley. Why?
A long silence on the line.
Come see me. Not on the phone.
Dad, I need to know.
I said, not on the phone.
His voice cracked.
There are things I should have told you years ago. Things about this family. Come see me, Helen, before it's too late.
The line went dead. Helen stood in the phone booth, receiver still in her hand, watching the traffic pass on the street outside. The nursing home smelled like disinfectant and lilies. Warren Marsh sat by the window of his private room, thinner than Helen remembered, his hands spotted with age. He didn't stand when she entered.
Close the door.
Helen did. She sat in the chair across from him, the same distance they'd maintained for most of her adult life.
The tape you received. Who sent it?
I don't know. No return address.
It was Carl Hensley's brother, Roy. He's been sitting on that recording for 40 years, waiting for someone to listen.
How do you know that?
Because I told him to wait. I told him if he released it too soon, They'd bury him like they buried Carl.
Helen leaned forward.
Who's they, Dad?
Warren turned to look out the window.
The same people who paid me to seal that file. The same people who've been running Fulton County since before you were born.
Warren's hands shook as he spoke. Helen had never seen her father afraid.
The Blackstone Trust wasn't a benefit fund. It was a death fund. The mine owners set it up in '71 to handle the payouts when men died underground. Standard practice back then. But somewhere along the line, someone figured out that dead miners were worth more than live ones.
The insurance policies.
Life insurance, accident insurance, disability. The trust was named beneficiary on all of them, and the trustees controlled who died and when.
That's murder.
That's business. In a company town, the company decides everything, including who's worth more dead than alive.
Helen's recorder was running. She'd turned it on when she sat down.
You knew all this, and you sealed the file anyway.
Warren closed his eyes.
They had photographs of me with a woman who wasn't your mother.
He opened his eyes.
I was weak, Helen, and 23 people are dead because of it.
Helen drove back to Fulton that night, her father's words playing in her head alongside the tape. She needed to find Roy Hensley, Carl's brother, the man who'd sent her the recording and waited 40 years for someone to do something with it. The Fulton phone book listed 7 Hensleys. She started calling from her motel room.
Roy, he don't live here no more.
Try the hardware store. He works mornings.
Helen found him the next day at Pruitt's Hardware on Main Street. A man in his 70s, with Carl's same lanky frame, stocking shelves in the electrical aisle.
Roy Hensley?
He turned, saw her face, and smiled.
You got it. The tape.
I got it.
Then you know why Carl had to read those names. And you know why they killed him for it.
Roy led Helen to the stockroom, past stacks of lumber and paint cans. He sat on an overturned bucket. Helen remained standing.
Carl figured it out in '83. He was doing the night shift, playing records, half asleep. Then he started noticing the obituaries.
The death rate.
23 people in 10 months. He knew most of them. Worked with their sons, drank with their husbands. He started keeping a list.
The names on the tape.
He wanted to go public. Tell someone. But who do you tell when the sheriff's on the payroll? When the judge is bought? When the mine owns everything, including the radio station?
Roy's voice cracked.
So he read the names on the air. Every person who died that year. Birth dates, death dates, beneficiary. He figured if enough people heard it, someone would have to do something.
But nobody did.
They cut the power at 3:47. Carl was gone by morning.
Helen spent the next week building her case. She cross-referenced the names from Carl's broadcasts with county death records, insurance filings, and the Blackstone Trust documents she'd obtained through a FOIA request. The pattern was undeniable. 23 deaths in 10 months. All ruled natural or accidental. All with life insurance policies naming the trust as beneficiary. Total payout, $1.4 million. In 1983 money, that was a fortune. Enough to keep a failing mine running. Enough to pay off judges and sheriffs. Enough to kill for. But she still didn't have proof of murder. The death certificates all listed legitimate causes. The insurance claims all processed normally. Without a witness willing to testify, without physical evidence, she had nothing but a pattern. And patterns weren't admissible in court. Helen returned to Roy's hardware store 3 days later with a list of questions. The store was closed. A sign in the window read, "Family emergency, back Monday." She drove to his house, a small frame structure on the edge of town. His truck was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. She was walking back to her car when a neighbor emerged from the house next door.
You looking for Roy?
He wasn't at work.
He's at the hospital. Fell down his basement stairs last night. Broke his hip.
Helen's stomach tightened.
Which hospital?
Charleston General. But you might want to wait. His family saying no visitors.
The neighbor looked at Helen with something that might have been warning.
Lot of people been falling lately. You be careful on those stairs yourself.
Helen drove to Charleston General. Roy was in the ICU, unconscious, tubes running from his arms. His daughter stood guard outside the room. You're the podcaster. The one who's been asking questions.
I'm trying to find out what happened to your Uncle Carl. My father knows what happened. That's why he's in there.
Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched at her sides.
Someone pushed him? Someone sent a message. Same message they've been sending for 40 years. Keep your mouth shut or end up like Carl. Who? Who's still doing this? The same people who've always done it. The trust, the trustees. The mine closed in '89. Who's running the trust now?
Roy's daughter laughed bitterly. Lady, the mine closed. The trust didn't. It just changed what it invested in. Land deals, development, politics. Same money, same families, same silence. Helen returned to the state records office the next morning with a new request. All amendments to the Blackstone Trust filed since 1985. The clerk recognized her.
You again. What are you looking for now?
Current trustees. The list was sealed in '85, but there must have been changes since then. Deaths, resignations.
The clerk typed for several minutes.
Here. Amendment filed in '91. 1 trustee removed due to death, 1 added.
Names?
Removed. Howard Cobb. Added.
She squinted at the screen.
Added. Warren P. Marsh.
Helen felt the room tilt.
That's not possible.
It's right here. Warren P. Marsh, appointed trustee November 15th, 1991.
Helen gripped the counter.
Mom? You're okay?
Her father hadn't just sealed the file. He'd joined them. He'd become one of the people he was supposed to be protecting the county from. Helen drove to Huntington in a daze. Her father was asleep when she arrived, his breathing shallow, monitors beeping beside his bed. She sat in the chair and waited. An hour passed, then 2. When he finally opened his eyes, she was ready.
You're a trustee. You didn't just seal the file, you joined them.
Warren's face crumpled.
It wasn't supposed to be like this.
How is it supposed to be?
They said they were done. After Carl, after the case was sealed, they said no more. The trust would just manage the money, legitimate investments. I thought I could watch them, make sure they kept their word.
And did they?
He turned away.
For a while.
Dad, how many more people died?
Silence.
I don't know. I stopped looking.
Helen stood.
Who else is on the trust? Who's still alive?
Helen, if you go after them...
Names? Dad.
He gave her 3. 3 names. 3 trustees still alive. 2 were in their 80s, residents of assisted living facilities in Charleston. The 3rd was younger, 64, active, currently serving as county commissioner for Fulton County. His name was Dale Pruitt, Walter's cousin, the same family that owned the hardware store where Roy Hensley worked. Helen sat in her car outside the county administration building, watching Dale Pruitt's office window. She'd been there for 2 hours, building her approach. She had a pattern of suspicious deaths. She had evidence of insurance fraud. She had her father's confession on tape. But she still didn't have proof that anyone had actually committed murder. The deaths were all ruled natural or accidental. The paperwork was all in order. Unless someone talked, the trust would survive. Unless someone broke. Helen found Walter Pruitt at the VFW that evening. He was alone at the bar, nursing a beer.
Your Aunt Gladys. She didn't die of a stroke.
Walter didn't turn around.
You're still here. I thought you'd have left by now.
Your cousin Dale is a trustee. The same trust that collected insurance money when your aunt died.
Walter's hand tightened on his glass.
How much did the family get? How much did Dale get?
You don't know what you're talking about.
I know 23 people died in 10 months. I know Carl Hensley read their names on the air and disappeared the same night. I know Roy Hensley is in the hospital with a broken hip because he talked to me.
She sat down beside him.
And I know you've been living with this for 40 years. Doesn't that get heavy, Walter?
He finished his beer in one long swallow.
Lighter than a grave.
Helen spent the next 3 days reviewing every document she'd collected. The pattern was clear now. 23 deaths in 1983 and 84. Then a gap. Then more deaths in 1992, 93, 94. Smaller numbers, 5 or 6 a year. All ruled natural. All with the trust as beneficiary. The trust had never stopped. It had just gotten more careful. She needed someone who could connect the deaths to deliberate action. Someone who had participated. Someone who was still alive. She thought about the 3 trustees, 2 in nursing homes, 1 running the county. Then she thought about the people who did the actual work. The doctors who signed the death certificates. The insurance agents who processed the claims. The people who'd looked the other way for 40 years. She started making calls. Dr. Ernest Caldwell had signed 14 of the death certificates Helen was investigating. He'd retired in 1996 and now lived alone in a house on the outskirts of Charleston. He answered the door in a cardigan and slippers, a man in his 80s with a face that had once been kind. I don't talk to reporters.
I'm not a reporter. I'm a researcher. Same thing. Dr. Caldwell, you signed the death certificate for Gladys Pruitt. Stroke, you wrote. But she was 59 years old with no history of cardiovascular disease.
His expression didn't change. Dr. Caldwell. People die of strokes. It happens.
14 people you examined died of natural causes in 10 months, all with the same insurance beneficiary. Coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence, doctor, and I don't think you do either.
He started to close the door. Helen put her hand on the frame.
They're still doing it. People are still dying. How long are you going to carry that?
Dr. Caldwell let her in. The house smelled like pipe tobacco and old books. He sat in a worn armchair while Helen took the couch. I was the company doctor. Blackstone paid my salary. They told me what to write.
They told you to lie on death certificates? They told me to write what they said. Heart attack, stroke, accident, whatever the family agreed to. The families knew? Some of them, the ones who got a cut. A widow with 3 kids and no job, they offer her $10,000 to say her husband died in his sleep instead of asking questions. She takes the money.
Helen's recorder was running on the coffee table between them.
But not all of them were accidents, were they?
Caldwell stared at the floor. I never saw anything. I just signed papers. But some of those bodies, the injuries didn't match the stories.
Which ones? All of them.
Helen spent 2 more days tracking down others who'd been part of the system. The insurance agent who processed the claims had died in 2004. The sheriff who'd investigated Carl's disappearance was in a memory care facility, unable to remember his own name. But she found the woman who'd worked as secretary for the trust from 1981 to 1995. Betty Marsh. No relation to Helen's family. She lived in a trailer park outside Huntington, surviving on Social Security and the occasional odd job. She didn't want to talk at first. Then Helen mentioned the names. Carl Hensley, Gladys Pruitt, Samuel Hensley, the 23 dead. Betty sat down heavily on her folding chair and lit a cigarette.
I typed the letters. The ones that told the insurance companies where to send the checks.
You knew what was happening?
I knew something was wrong. I didn't ask questions. None of us did.
Helen returned to her motel room that night with 3 recordings. Dr. Caldwell admitting he'd falsified death certificates. Betty Marsh describing the trust's financial operations. And her father explaining how he'd sealed the case and joined the conspiracy. She had enough now. Not for a criminal prosecution. Too many years had passed. Too many witnesses were dead or compromised. But enough for a documentary. Enough to expose what had happened in Fulton County. Enough to name the people responsible. She started writing. The outline came quickly: the deaths, the trust, the cover-up. Carl Hensley's broadcast and disappearance, the judge who sealed the case and became a trustee, the county commissioner who still controlled the money. By midnight, she had 30 pages of notes and a structure for the story. Then she heard the sound of tires on gravel outside her window. Helen grabbed her recorder and her laptop. She was at the back door when the front door opened. Dale Pruitt stood in the doorway, 2 men behind him. He was smaller than she'd expected. A man in his 60s, with the soft hands of someone who'd never worked a day underground.
Ms. Marsh, I think we should talk.
How did you find me?
This is my county. I know everything that happens here.
The 2 men moved into the room, blocking the exits.
You've been busy. Talking to Dr. Caldwell, talking to Betty, talking to your father.
Recording them, actually.
She held up her recorder.
Everything's backed up to the cloud. If something happens to me, it publishes automatically.
Dale smiled.
I'm not here to threaten you, Ms. Marsh. I'm here to offer you a deal.
Dale sat down in the room's only chair, casual, as if he owned the place. Which, in a sense, he did.
Your father was a trustee for 30 years. Did he tell you that? He took money every year. Legitimate payments, all documented.
Is that supposed to make me stop?
It's supposed to make you understand. Everyone in this county has taken something. The doctors, the lawyers, the families. You think Betty Marsh lived on Social Security alone? She got $500 a month from the trust until she retired.
And the dead?
The dead were going to die anyway. Mining is dangerous. Life is dangerous. We just accelerated the timeline. Made sure the families were taken care of.
Helen felt sick.
23 people in 10 months.
23 people who were worth more dead than alive. To their families, to the company, to everyone.
Except to themselves.
Helen thought about the recordings on her laptop, the confessions, the documents, the pattern of death stretching back 40 years. She thought about Carl Hensley, reading names into a microphone at 3 a.m., knowing what it would cost him. She thought about her father, compromised and broken and still alive when better people were dead.
Here's what I think happened.
Dale's eyebrows rose.
The trust started as a legitimate benefit fund, but by '82, the mine was failing. Insurance payouts were worth more than coal. Someone, probably Howard Cobb, figured out that dead miners meant cash. You identified targets, people who were sick or old or disposable. You paid doctors to falsify death certificates. You paid families to keep quiet. And when Carl Hensley figured it out and went public, you killed him and paid my father to bury the case.
She looked at Dale steadily.
The mine closed in '89, but you didn't stop. You just switched to land deals, development, politics, same system, different victims.
That's quite a theory.
It's not a theory, it's a documentary, and it's publishing in 72 hours.
Dale's smile faded.
You can't prove any of this.
I have Dr. Caldwell on tape admitting he falsified death certificates on your orders. I have Betty Marsh describing the trust's payment system. I have my father explaining how he sealed the case and why. And I have Carl Hensley's original broadcast naming every victim.
Your father is a trustee. His testimony implicates him as much as anyone.
I know. That's why I'm including him in the documentary.
Dale leaned forward.
You destroy your own father?
My father destroyed himself 30 years ago. He just hasn't admitted it yet.
She moved toward the door. The 2 men didn't block her.
72 hours, Mr. Pruitt. That's how long you have to decide if you want to talk on the record. Otherwise, I tell the story without you.
She walked out into the parking lot. No one followed. Helen drove straight to Charleston and checked into a hotel downtown. She didn't sleep. She spent the night editing her recordings, organizing her documents, building the structure of the documentary. By dawn, she had a rough cut. Carl Hensley's broadcast, the list of the dead, the confessions, the documents, the pattern that stretched from 1983 to the present day. She emailed the files to 3 different lawyers, 2 journalists, and her producer in Morgantown. Then she made one more call.
Helen? It's 5 in the morning.
I'm publishing in 48 hours, Dad. You can be part of the story, or you can be the villain. Your choice.
A long silence.
I don't want to be remembered this way.
Then tell the truth. All of it. On camera.
Another silence.
When?
Today. I'm coming to you.
Helen filmed her father that afternoon. He sat in his wheelchair by the window, the same position he'd been in when she first confronted him. But his voice was different now, steadier, like a man finally setting down a weight he'd carried for decades.
I sealed the case because they had photographs. But I stayed because I told myself I could watch them. Make sure they didn't kill anyone else. I told myself I was protecting people.
Were you?
No, I was protecting myself. I was protecting my career, my family, my reputation. I let people die because I was too afraid to stop them.
He looked directly at the camera.
My name is Warren Marsh. I was a circuit court judge in West Virginia for 32 years, and I helped cover up the murders of at least 23 people.
Helen stopped the recording. Her father was crying. The documentary went live at noon on a Tuesday. Helen watched the view counter climb from her hotel room in Charleston. Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. By evening, 50,000. By midnight, it was trending. The phone calls started the next morning. Journalists, lawyers, law enforcement. The West Virginia State Police opened an investigation. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit requested copies of all her documents. Dale Pruitt issued a statement denying everything. Then he stopped answering his phone. Helen watched it all unfold from a distance, the way she'd watched 100 other stories break over her years as a podcaster. But this one was different. This one had her father's face in it. This one had her name attached. This one was personal in a way nothing else had ever been. 3 weeks later, Helen returned to Fulton. The county administration building was quiet, Dale Pruitt's office empty. He'd resigned the day after the FBI subpoenaed the trust's financial records. She drove past the old WKRD building, still boarded, still silent. Then she drove to Roy Hensley's house. He was home from the hospital now, sitting on his front porch with a walker beside his chair. He raised a hand when he saw her car.
You did it. You told the story.
Your brother told the story 40 years ago.
And nobody listened.
They're listening now.
Roy looked at the ridge above town, where the transmission tower had once stood.
Carl would have liked that. He always said the truth was out there, waiting for someone to turn on the microphone.
The FBI is exhuming bodies. They want to verify the death certificates.
Good. Let them dig. Let them see what we've been living with all these years.
Helen visited her father one last time before she left West Virginia. The nursing home was quieter now, fewer staff in the halls. Warren was awake when she arrived, staring out the window at nothing.
The FBI came yesterday, took my statement.
Are they going to charge you?
Probably. Obstruction at minimum. Maybe accessory after the fact.
He turned to look at her.
I deserve it. I've deserved it for 40 years.
I know.
I'm sorry, Helen. For everything. For the lies, for the silence, for making you the one who had to expose it.
Helen didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Some wounds didn't heal with words.
Will you come back? After?
I don't know, Dad.
She stood.
But I'll think about it.
She left him there, staring out the window at the mountains he'd betrayed. 6 months later, the federal grand jury indicted 4 people in connection with the Fulton County deaths. Dale Pruitt, charged with conspiracy and fraud. Dr. Ernest Caldwell, charged with falsifying federal documents. Warren Marsh, charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. And a 4th name, one Helen hadn't expected. Betty Marsh, the secretary who'd typed the letters, charged as an accessory. The trials would take years. Some of the defendants wouldn't live to see verdicts, but the story was out now. The names were spoken. Carl Hensley's broadcast, preserved on a cassette tape for 40 years, was entered into evidence. The silence had finally been broken. Helen returned to Morgantown, to her apartment, to her work. She had other stories to tell, other mysteries to solve. But sometimes, late at night, she'd pull out the original tape and listen to Carl's voice reading names into the darkness. 23 lives, one broadcast, and a truth that waited 40 years to be heard.